One of the most contentious subjects in Islam is the role of art and spirituality. What is the relationship, between art and spirituality? Is art halal or is it haram? This has been an issue that has been debated over a long period of time. And there are different positions regarding this. There are people who define art in much broader terms, and others who define it in very narrow terms. Those who define art in broader terms include, for example, music, painting, while those who define Islamic art in narrow terms just confine it to a few aspects. And for example, is reciting melodiously verses of the Quran acceptable or unacceptable? So there's a lot of literature on this. Art and spirituality cannot be separated. Like, for example, if you look at the art of designing mushaf, you find that most mushafs are literally decorated, with floral patterns mostly. And that has been one of these quintessential Islamic arts. Instead of human representation, we find that flowers and floral patterns take the place of human representation. So floral patterns have been quite important in Islamic art, but it doesn't mean that there have never been human representations in Islamic art, although some schools of thought are very strict about this, that there should never be floral human representation. But we find that Islamic art also has a long tradition of human representation in art, especially, for example, what is called miniature art. Miniature art is the art that describes things on a minuscule scale, very, very tiny scales. So if you look at this miniature art, often it is associated with the Shia, and you see human representation in that art. When it comes again to music, some people hold very, very strong views on this. That playing music, is haram. Keeping musical instruments drives away the angels. These are some of the positions of some of these very hard positions on music. But for others, they said, this is just part of human life, and you cannot eliminate music, in the lives of human beings. And in fact, this is an interesting issue, because if you look at music, you find that there are very, very close parallels between musical notes and human sounds. Just to give you an example, you find that we have musical traditions. There's not one musical tradition, but we have several musical traditions. And how do we know this? If we listen to a piece of music, then we can actually place it within certain geographical areas. Like we can say that this sounds like Indian music, or this sounds like African music, or this sounds like such and such music. It is because there are limited musical notes, and every musical culture takes only a handful of these. So, for example, if hypothetically there are 50 musical notes, some cultures will take 48 of these notes. Others will take 17. Others will take 20. So it doesn't matter. It doesn't mean that the musical culture that takes more musical notes is more advanced than the ones that take less musical notes. It has all something to do with the patterning of those musical notes. Just like we have a very limited number of human sounds that actually represent human ability to produce these sounds. So just hypothetically, if there are 28 sounds, some languages will take 15, some will take 9, and some will take, let's say, 22. And it is in the way that these are patterned that will distinguish them from all the others. So it doesn't mean that if one language has more musical notes, it is more advanced or better. No, it is just that it is going to be different on the basis of how these sounds are patterned. And the same thing goes with musical notes. So it doesn't mean that a language that has more musical notes, that language is more advanced than others. No, it is just the actual patterning that distinguishes one from another. And musical cultures or musical notes are just like human beings. We each have our own distinctive ways of dressing that will set us apart from all other people. We try as much as possible to distinguish ourselves. Somebody might put on a suit like mine, but probably they are going to put on a hat all the time. They put on a suit. So that will, of course, automatically, this is so-and-so's style. So art has always been a very important part of Islamic culture. And some of the leading artists, some of the leading architects have actually been drawn from the Islamic tradition. A very good example is, of course, Zaha Hadid. Zaha Hadid is the most famous architect of the 21st century. And she is of Islamic background. And she is rooted in both Islamic art and Western art. She combines this effortlessly in her work. The backdrop or the background, to her art, of course, is mathematics. And mathematics has been one of these central disciplines in Islamic culture because of patterns. When we look at what we call Arabesque artistic culture, we find that all these designs are rooted in mathematical calculations. If it is parallelograms or whatever, they have been informed by mathematics. This Islamic obsession with mathematics, as I said, had something to do with the tradition of keeping away from human representation. So if you don't have a human representation, then you're going to have a graphic representation. Muslims are also associated with miniature art, which is mostly really a Shia genre, because the Shias are not as strict when it comes to representing the human form, whereas other traditions, there's a very strict prohibition of the representation of human form. So if you look at early Shia representations, you find that they in fact have these human forms in what was called miniature art. Related to this, of course, is also music or sound. Again, is music halal or haram, or how should music be handled? Because, for example, we have tajweed and the recitation of the Quran in a beautiful manner is in fact enjoined, that it is something nice to do, as long as it is recited within certain confines. You know, there should not be exaggeration. There should be just reflect the dignity of the Quran and the beauty of the Quran, but it should not be exaggerated in such a way that people pay attention more to the mode rather than the content of what is recited. So there's always this balance in Islam, and of course, like if we look at tajweed, again there are different forms, there are different traditions, and there are different names of reciters. Like, for example, one of the most important Quran reciters of the 1970s, 1980s was Mohamed Khalil Alhusari, you know, the Egyptian reciter. And then, of course, from there, you know, he became a household name throughout the Islamic world. And then later you had the emergence of new recitation styles that were associated, for example, today with Hudayfi and other Saudi reciters, both in Mecca and in Medina. But it's such a pleasure listening to some of these people, because they know how to hold the balance and the emphasis in the